So today we're going to talk about understanding web pages. So a web page is really just composed of HTML. So what you see on the screen is actually a series of codes that are written in HTML. So what is HTML? Well, it stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Hypertext is how you move around the page. So you click on a link and it takes you to a new page or to a different area on the page. HTML is not a programming language. It's actually a tag-based markup language, which means that the tags define the formatting and structure of the page and not some sort of logical programming. XHTML applies XML standards to HTML, and together they're referred to as X in parentheses HTML. So where HTML is used to describe the structure and format of a page, CSS is how you make it pretty. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it describes how your HTML is going to look in a browser. You can also create different looks for different media. So you can have a different CSS for print, for browsers, handheld devices, and so on. We'll start writing CSS towards the middle of the semester. So here's how the web works. You type XHTML, which is a series of HTML tags and other text, into a plain text file or an ASCII text file. Then you save that text as an HTML file or .html, and then you upload that HTML file to a web server. Once the file's up on the web server, it is live and ready to be viewed by your audience. So a user types the URL for your web page into a browser. Using the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or HTTP, the browser sends a request out to the web server to retrieve that file. The web server responds, sending the file back. When the browser receives your plain text file, it translates the XHTML and CSS into a visible form. So what was code before becomes a pretty web page. There are a lot of things to consider when you're creating a web page. We're going to look at a few over the next couple slides. Because it's the browser that translates your HTML code into a visible form, it's going to be very important for you guys to test your pages in a browser, preferably multiple browsers. If you do not write your tags correctly, it is very likely that your page will appear incorrectly in a browser. Also, each browser translates HTML and CSS a little differently, so your web page may look great in one browser and horrible in another. We're going to be spending more time with the multiple browsers once we get to CSS. Third, browsers change over time. In 2008, no one was using IE8 because it wasn't out. Now 15.6% of users are using it. Similarly, Chrome, only 3% were using it in 2008, now 16.7%. So you need to keep up with the modern browsers. So what can you do when you're writing a page? Well, first of all, don't sweat the small stuff. You can't control what the end user sees absolutely, so don't bother to try. But that said, you need to stick to standards and good clean markup. You need to write HTML that is correct and accurate. We'll be talking more about that as the semester progresses. And you also don't want to add browser-specific elements. So there's no point in designing specifically for one browser because browsers come and go. So why don't you want to sweat the small stuff? Well, actually, users have a heck of a lot of control over how your web page is going to look. They can change the font size, the background colors, text colors, ignore CSS style sheets altogether, or apply their own. They can turn images off, turn Java and JavaScript off, and turn off pop-up windows. So what you can do is design your page for flexibility and make sure that your content is accessible without images, scripts, and plugins. So you want to make sure it makes sense even if all of that stuff has been changed. Another difference you're going to run into is operating systems. Different operating systems like Windows, Mac, and Unix and Linux have many differences between them, such as different fonts that are available. They render form elements differently, and they offer different plugins and media players. Some browsers only work on certain operating systems as well. So IE only works on Windows. It doesn't work on Mac or Linux. So what you can do is, again, allow for variation, that your pages may look different in different operating systems. You may love the graffiti font that's on your computer, but unless it's installed on the user's computer, they're never going to see it. So you need to stick to common fonts and specify alternatives. And then you want to use common media types and offer alternatives so that you can make sure all your users can interact with your media. Another challenge you're going to encounter are your users' connection speeds. So according to the textbook for this class, about 70% of the US has a broadband connection and about 30% are still using dial-up. So you want to be kind to those people on dial-up if they're part of your audience. So what you can do is keep your file sizes small. This is going to be very important for images and any other media like videos or audio. The other thing you need to do is consider your audience. If you know your audience is all on broadband, then the file sizes aren't quite as important. If you know you have a lot of dial-up users, they're very, very important, so you need to consider them. So two other things that are going to affect how your web page looks to the end user are monitor resolution and window size. Fortunately, monitors have been getting bigger and have more resolution over the years, so currently just about all users have monitors that are capable of 1024 by 768 or better. So that's good news. But you also have to remember that your user has control over the size of their browser window. It can be tiny or it can be full screen. So what you can do is, again, design flexible web pages. So you need to have a web page that works on the tiny window and the big window, the monitor with small resolution and the monitor with big resolution. Another thing that's greatly improved with monitors is their color. Back in the day, monitors were capable of producing a fairly few colors, so there was this web-safe color palette that was introduced that allowed monitors to see the colors that you were using in your web page. Today, most monitors are capable of making 16 million plus colors, so the web-safe color palette is important to be familiar with, and we'll talk about it, but it's less important than it used to be. So finally, accessibility. Some users may have vision, mobility, auditory, or cognitive impairments. Part of writing standards-based XHTML is accommodating these users. To do so, you need to write semantic XHTML, which means writing clean code that's logical, well-ordered, and meaningful. You want to provide text alternatives for media. So you want to provide a description for your image, captioning for your video, a transcript for your audio. You don't want to trap text in graphics. So the button that you so carefully created, you don't want to bake the text right into it, or someone with a vision impairment cannot see it. You want to use XHTML's accessibility features, which we can talk about as the semester progresses. And you want to be careful with color, pattern, and motion. For example, a colorblind user cannot see all colors, so you need to consider their needs when designing the color scheme for your website. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff to consider when designing a web page. This has been an overview. We'll talk about the gory details as the semester progresses.